Yeah. There we go.
So did you? I can't use it if it's not on. Did you turn it on? We'll try that. There we go. So I think we were supposed to spend just a little bit of time talking about what we think Agile might look like in the future. Is that what you asked us?
It's a view to the future.
View to the future, sure.
Talk about the future of Agile.
So you've heard of yin yang, and this is the good Chinese symbol that shows that when anything rises, something else falls, and when something falls, the other thing rises. And everything is a cycle, just like, you know, summer goes into fall and winter and spring, and similarly, styles of software development come and go just the same way. And this is a very oriental way of looking at the world. Now, if you want to look at the way people in, for instance, the United States take a look at the world, it's more like that. It's one side or the other, and I'm going to fight to see which side is the more important one, right? So I think this is false. I think there are essential tensions between two different sides. People, process, product, and planning and performance. Okay, so we have an argument. Should we have self-managed teams? Or should we have responsible managers? And every time you talk about any kind of management, people say, oh, well, then the teams can't be self-organizing. But I think if you take a look at what can be in the middle, I'm looking at, in the future, we want to have teams with effective leaders. So you can have both self-organized teams and managers that know what they're doing, and have teams with effective leaders. Then we have this thing called empirical process and defined process, as much as I don't like that word. So what kind of process are we going to have? Is it going to be empirical, or are we going to have some sort of definition of how process should be? I think in the future we have to figure out how to go with something that constantly improves. It's neither one. It's going to be a combination that's going to depend upon, first of all, your environment, and constantly improves. And then we have, on one side, the development team is the important core, and on the other side, the customers, the business, well, I don't like the business, I like our business, and operations. So instead of having those two sides that fight with each other, I'd like to see a whole team that goes and sees what the real problem is, talks about our business. We don't use the word the business, because the business means that business out over there. Instead, we're part of the business, so it's our business over the long term. And then we have some tensions with planning. There's those who want adaptability and learning and evolving design. And then there's people who are looking for predictability and commitment. And don't you think we have to have some architecture on the front? And I think we have to have some sort of a combination of those things, which goes to pull scheduling, set-based design. Set-based design is multiple option design. I don't have time to talk much about it. And technical vision. So yeah, we have to know where we're going. We have to have a technical vision on the front. And anytime I talk about technical vision, people say, oh, you want to do all the big planning up front. No, not necessarily. There's a halfway point. Okay, and then we have iteration goals in performance. And that's all we want to think about. If we get our iteration goals, we're good. And then there's people that say, what about cost? What about schedule? What about scope? So I think the middle ground on that is customers have to be delighted. That's how we tell if we've done a good job. We've got delighted customers, not product owners, customers. We got workers who are proud of doing their job. People who are working, people who are developing, people who are testing are proud of their work. We have sustainable profitability. That's how we're going to know we're successful. And we have breakthrough innovation. And it's neither side. It's sort of both. Now, do I think we're going to get to these middle grounds? Well, if we stay on one side or the other of any one of these and think that either side is the right way to go, I think we won't get to the middle ground. There's essential tensions between different ways of looking at things, and we have to figure out how to compromise on those tensions without compromising. We have to get to the center of both of them without compromising on either of them. That's enough. That's my time.
It's always hard to follow Mary. She does such a great job. Well, you handed me the mic, so I guess
There you go.
So I'd rather listen to Mary for another hour, but I have to talk. So what occurs to me about the future of IT, for instance, is structure begets function. This idea that the structure of something makes it either easy or hard for activities to occur in a certain way. Let's say you wanted to build a drain pipe to take water away from your house. If you built it so that it had holes all in the sides of it, it wouldn't work very well. The water wouldn't flow away, it would spill. If you built it so that it was plugged, the water would just back up into your house. The structure that you're using doesn't support the functionality that you're trying to get to. I was reminded of a team that I went to visit once. They said that one of their values as a team they wanted to pursue was pair programming, but they never really could do it. They kept thinking of excuses not to do it. And so one day while most of them were out of the room, a couple of us removed half of the workstations and organized the tables so that when you sat in the team area, you were sitting right next to someone and there was a workstation in front of you. And lo and behold, their pairing time went up to a reasonable level. You don't pair all the time, of course, but that they started to meet their goal for using that technique. And it was because the structure of the room made it the course of least resistance for them to do that. I think we're having a problem on a larger scale in IT because of the structural division between our customers and our technical staff. As Mary alluded to, there's like two worlds, and they think of themselves as different. The business, for instance, very good choice of words. Maybe in the 1950s when there were, I don't know how many computers in the world, maybe 10 or something, and real people thought that these were very strange machines, and the people who used the machines were also strange, and so they segregated them. And this segregation has been maintained in organizational structure. But today, the typical business person has more technology on their person than there was in those days, when they have their cell phone, they have all kinds of things on them, the PDA or whatever it is, and they have computers at home, they have one in their briefcase. They're loaded with technology, and they're not afraid of it, and they don't think it's strange. So there's no real reason to separate the people. I think we need to move that line in the structure of organizations and have one area that's central IT services, and this would be doing things like the technical infrastructure for the enterprise. What I think Mary called earlier this week, the stuff that doesn't matter to customers, but has to be there. On the other hand, the people who are developing the stuff that does matter to customers should work in the lines of business, not for the IT department that is treated as an external service. They should be integral to the business that they're supporting. And then some of these agile concepts that are so difficult to implement would just fall into place because they would be the course of least resistance. For example, the dedicated team. The same people are supporting the same group of applications. It doesn't matter whether they're writing them for the first time or if they're supporting them after 5 years in production. That's their thing that they do. And that would solve so many problems. And it comes down to the structure of the organization making that easy instead of hard. And that's one of my personal ideas anyway about where we should be looking for the future, to restructure our organizations. The current structure reflects an old way of working and makes the new way harder. So let's change the structure.
Now it is. He wanted to trick me. My name's Tobias Mayer, in case I haven't met you yet, and it's wonderful to be here for this conference. I've had a fantastic time. I've met some amazing people, and I've re-met some amazing people from 2 years ago when I was here teaching Scrum. And I'm incredibly impressed by the progress that Scrum has made since 2 years ago. So, in a retrospective, we tend to look towards the future by starting off by looking backwards and say, where did we come from? And I think that might be quite useful to do right now. When I came here 2 years ago, I ran some certified Scrum Master training courses, and the people there were full of enthusiasm and didn't have much knowledge. And that was fine, and I spent 2 days, exploring the principles and the gut feeling, if you like, of what Scrum means to me. And I come back here a couple of years later. I did 2 visits and three training courses over here. 2 of them with my colleague Alan, who many of you know as a co-facilitator, and Alan's now a certified Scrum trainer himself. And I come back here 2 years later, and I'm running a CSM course here today, and I ask people in the course, I say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate yourself in your knowledge and understanding of Scrum? And people are rating themselves, I think on average, we had an average of around 5.5 to 6 on that course. That's just people self-assessing themselves. And I thought, okay, well, maybe they're kind of like a little overconfident here. But no, it wasn't like that. They actually came with an incredible amount of knowledge about the world of Agile, the world of Lean, and the world of Scrum, and they were contributing with some amazing questions. At the end of day 1, I always do a retrospective on that course, and I ask people, as you do in a regular retrospective, what did you like about what was happening so far, and what did you not like, and where can we go next? And one of the things people said they liked on that course, I think without exception, was the strength of the conversations they were having with other people at their table. I've never ever had that in a certified Scrum Master course before, and that tells me that the level of knowledge that was being shared was really, really valuable. And I think that's incredible. So where is Agile going in the future? I have no idea. I really don't, actually. I think we're at the beginning. Dave talked about this in his talk over metrics about the crossing the chasm thing. He said we're still on the small side of that. We haven't crossed it yet. And I think Scrum and Lean and Agile and all this software stuff is just a tiny part of a much, much, much bigger movement in the world, away from mechanistic ways of thinking and towards human systems, complex adaptive systems, the recognition that we are part of a complex adaptive system and we have to behave accordingly in order to be successful with what we do. This has nothing to do with software. It's being utilized by businesses in many different ways. Agile is one of those. But it's something that goes beyond all of this. And I think that if anyone knows the term, knows what a paradigm shift is, there's something known as a Kuhnian paradigm shift, which is sort of outlined by a guy whose name is Kuhn, and I don't know his first name. My history and science is very rocky, so don't quote me on anything, but feel free to correct me afterwards. I'll be very happy to be corrected. But the idea of a real true paradigm shift means there is absolutely no room for the old way of thinking in the new way of thinking. Utterly no room at all. It is not about compromise and finding how do we fit the old paradigm into the new one. And as an example of a paradigm shift, think back to the Dark Ages when we believed that our world, our Earth, was the center of the universe and the sun revolved around us and all the other planets revolved around us. That was a way of thinking that was fixed in people's minds. We went through a paradigm shift as a result of the Renaissance, and people like Copernicus and Galileo and Descartes took us into a new way of thinking. There is utterly no room in the world now to think that the Earth is the center of the universe and it's flat. Only insane people think that. They're in asylums.
And 2-year-olds.
And who? And 2-year-olds, perhaps.
They have a website.
And
People who believe they are flat.
there is a flatearth.com, apparently.
FlatEarthSociety.com.
But these, my friends, these are the exceptions that prove the rule. There is no room for that. So if you're thinking, how do I make Agile fit into my current way of thinking and current way of working, you might be thinking the wrong thing. What you need to be thinking is, how can I learn to think differently? I think you need to be prepared to let go of everything you think you know right now about how to to build software and how to do your job and how to interact with people in your organization. I'm not saying you have to forget it all. Be prepared to forget it. We don't quite know which direction this paradigm shift is going, but it's going somewhere huge, and everything is going to be different. And so, you know, when people ask me, how do I make CMMI, I know that Matt was talking about this today, how do I make CMMI and Agile work together? How do I make this compliance work with that? How do I fit in the current roles of my organization to Agile? I don't know. I don't think you should. I don't think you should try. I think you should reconceive everything. I think you should question every single thing you do. And I just want to take 2 minutes before I pass this mic on for you to turn to your neighbour, or just form a pair. Just have a conversation in a pair, or if you can't find a pair, do 3. And I just want you to say, what is your personal vision of the future with Agile? Because Agile is going to, it's not one thing. It's no one's going to set the vision and we're all going to follow it. It's just what we want to do. The future is going to be what we make it. So what do you want it to be? I want you to turn to your neighbour and just have a 1.5 minute, 90-second conversation about, where am I going? Off you go, do that. I'm done. It's your turn.
Dos minutos hablan con el vecino o dos vecinos. Vamos.
It will disappear shortly before the organization disappears. The very first company that we gave our lean course to was Standard Life in Edinburgh, Scotland. They are a life insurance company. They sell pension plans and the like, just like the government just nationalized all of yours. Well, that's one of the corresponding ones in Scotland. And we were there. There were a lot of good people, just like there are a lot of good people here. And they basically had 2 cycle times with which they could deliver applications. One of them was 1 month. And that cycle time was in the case where they would have to comply with the regulation. So the red tape disappeared, and they immediately got things done. Yeah, or they could have to stop doing business. So that was no problem. The other cycle time was infinity. All of the approvals and waiting and everything else meant that they never got anything released. Well, many of you saw the slide which indicated that 2/3 of all the features you put in your software are never used or seldom used. And many of you agree that, yeah, that's what I'm asked to do. The CIO of the Standard Life saw that slide, and he thought to himself, this is a Financial Times article, so that's why I can talk about it in public, because he put this in print. He said to himself, what kind of incompetent company would have 60% of what they write be totally unnecessary, that it was never used? And then Mary said in the executive session that we were holding for them, and your people, who we were talking to in the last 2 days, told us that in 70% of what you asked them to write has never been used. And that really set them back. One of the things he did in response was to take the lights out activity that Dave described and runs that as a operations activity. And then he took a large part of the development group that supported applications that are used by people and located them in the same